Good evening, adventurers. In tonight's tale, we will follow up with part 2 of our lazy DM Rime of the Frostmaiden adventure. So far, our author has been ostracised by the group for picking a human as his character race, and the DM has seen fit to include a DMPC who happens to be a were-polar bear and is the de facto leader of the party as well. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, a link will pop up in the video now. And of course, potential spoilers for Rime of the Frostmaiden. Let's continue. Tonight's tale is called Lazy Furry DM Spoils Icewind Dale, Part 2. Let's get into it. To give the gist of my first session of my fail-tastic attempt at playing Icewind Dale, 1. I learn the whole party consists of furries who proceed to mock me for choosing to play a human. 2. I'm told my character wasn't smart enough to have packed for the temperature of Icewind Dale, and I'm forced to pay all my money to replace my gear for heavy weather gear that mechanically functions the same as my starter gear. The DM introduces a cast of NPCs to assist us in a quest, gets bored of having them around halfway through their introduction, and unceremoniously kills them off with an avalanche that almost kills the party. Let me tell you what happened during my second and last session with this particular group. So, I spend the rest of the following week reflecting on my experience with this group. I've been a regular of this subreddit for a while, but I was truly mystified that a group this dysfunctional could possibly exist in reality. The DM is not only egotistical with his fursona DMPC bossing everyone around, but he's so lazy he can hardly be bothered to run encounters and play NPCs that aren't his avatar. I try to rationalise it away as the typical awkwardness and slowness of the first few levels, whilst the party is squishy and trying to get to know each other. I tell myself that the next session will be better, because the party will be spending it in town. That should give me a chance to roleplay my character and get to know everyone a little better. In short, that doesn't happen, and I end up getting so frustrated that I get up and leave 2 hours into the session. I'd already learned how much of a lazy, disorganised jerk our DM was, but I didn't truly recognise the depths of his disinterest in running his own game. This session can be best described as a slow-moving train wreck of venom, disorganisation, and boredom that ultimately became too much to bear. So, let's start at the beginning of the session. We're currently travelling back to town on the back of our Tabaxi Ranger's pet bison, and the DM decides it's time for a random encounter. Suddenly, the ground starts rumbling beneath our feet. A massive monster comes over the horizon and stomps past our tiny group. It's the Tarrasque. Everyone freaks out for a little bit, but the DM tells us we're beneath its notice and it passes us by. He tells us both in and out of character that he's going to lead us back to kill that thing when we're level 20. My level 3 warlock jokes that if someone told him they were going to fight something that big, he'd tell them good luck and sit in the tavern, which gets a few chuckles from the rest of the group. The DM audibly scoffs and calls me a coward. Now maybe it was him trying to be in character, since his DMPC avatar Marty Stew the polar bear is supposed to be this wise and valorous leader, but the raw contempt in his voice and what he ends up doing later makes me strongly suspect that he was serious. I'm caught off guard and more than a little irritated, and consider it strike one. We get to the next town and get stopped by the gate's guards. Apparently there's a serial killer going around that's a werebear, like our party lead, and so they're hesitant to let him through the gates. More guards come out and surround him, and his DMPC goes into some melodramatic speech about how he will not resist these noble guards, who are only doing their duty. But please don't arrest his beloved friends. I should point out that the DM has a very flat, droning voice. When he tried to speak in his DMPC's voice, I think he was trying to sound all lofty and wise, with this weird, airy lilt to his tone. All it managed to do was make him sound like he was a fat man out of breath, panting every word. Not interested in hearing this speech, the party scatters. Some of us just bolt away, while one genius gets the idea in his head to somehow climb over the wall and jump down into the village using his furry powers. He fails and takes massive fall damage, falling over the wall. The DM sighs and utters a line that will be burned into my mind forever. Well, out of character, I'll let you know. He goes on to explain that this isn't how he wanted his encounter to go. He just wanted to add some flavour, whilst also totally hogging the spotlight, and hype up an encounter with this were-polar bear he plans on hitting us with later. In contrast with their suspicion of just a few seconds ago, the guards suddenly lower their spears, and I quote straight from the DM's mouth, we're just guard dudes. If you say you won't cause trouble, it's not our business what you're doing here. So they open the gate, and the DM declares we all head to the tavern. No explanations, no roleplay, no player agency. The guards just let us through and we magically appear in the tavern with the DM PC. How immersive. Does the guy that tried to skip the cutscene and jump the gate get his missing health back? No, of course not. He just shouldn't have tried that. Moving on. So we get the bounty for killing the Yetis, and it's at this point he pulls strike 2. The Tabaxi Ranger gets her share of the reward and starts celebrating. I've mentioned the Tabaxi before because she's really the only other member of the group that stood out as memorable. We barely interacted, but she was probably the only person in the group I'd care to play with again. In contrast to the edgelords and generic guys we were playing with, she liked to crack jokes and brightened up the mood by not really taking things too seriously. What little I could glean of her backstory was that she was some sort of nomad that lived out in the tundra alone, and so got really excited and cheerful when she got to interact with people. When she gets her share of the pay, she describes how her character does a little happy dance and crawls up on our werebear leader's shoulder to give him a hug. Well, out of character, I'll let you know. The DM pauses things to tell her not to try that with him again, that he works a long job before taking the time to come and DM this game, and how he's got all sorts of issues with physical contact, and why it's unnecessary. I've been through too much stuff to deal with stuff like this. Trying that with me IRL would result in a lot of trouble for you. The only time an edgelord sounds cringier than he already is when he's a furry and he tries to growl like a bear after saying it, and only manages to sound like drunk Chewbacca choking to death. Nonetheless, the Tabaxi apologises and gets really quiet for the rest of the time I'm there. We move on, with the mood thoroughly killed. The DM declares it's time for the party to handle any business we have in town. I'm surprised that the DM doesn't do downtime activities like Xanathars explains. Rather than have us just say what we're doing and do it off screen, or roll a few dice, he has everyone do effectively a one-on-one RP with him for whatever shopping trip or activity they want to do, which results in everyone else standing around being bored. And every time someone does something that would actually require some roleplay, he sighs and chimes in, well, out of character, I'll let you know. Every single time. Don't get attached to this NPC. The book says I'm supposed to be helpful while playing him, but he's a spy for a cult. No point asking that kid questions about the murders. The book says he doesn't know anything. That's right. This bad DM is somehow simultaneously dedicated to being as lazy as possible in his storytelling and committed to maximum realism at the same time. On the druid's turn, before they can declare what they're going to do, the DM declares that the druid's pocket was picked. The druid declares that he's going to track down the thief. Cue 15 minutes of asking around where the thief hideout is, going into the thief hideout, finding 5 thieves standing around counting out the stolen coin purse. The druid loudly demands to have his money back. The DM starts sniggering. The DM asks why the druid went to get the coin purse when it was the paladin who was pickpocketed. Everyone was confused. That's not what you said. You clearly said it was the druid. Everyone backs the druid up on this, saying the DM must have misspoken. Can he just change it so it was a druid that was robbed, or have the paladin be there instead? He ignores everyone and starts laughing like he's pulled the funniest prank in the world on the druid, loudly wondering why he chose to waste his turn on a side quest that wasn't even his. You're the one who literally told him to do it. You chose not to correct him at any point you were making him RP this investigation. You're the one at fault for this, you gaslighting arse. But it's okay, because he forgives the druid for his mistake, and has the thieves give the coin purse back without a fight, going to the next player's turn. Eventually, we get to my turn. And if you saw the previous part, I mentioned that I'm playing a warlock in Icewind Dale to do a service for my patron. I'm waiting for my patron to reach out to me to give me instructions on what quest I'm supposed to do for him. This is the backstory the DM agreed to give me, on the understanding he'd be expected to give me a hook at some point to go along with what the party's doing. Okay, warlock, what do you want to do? What? What's your character motivation? He came to Icewind Dale for something, right? Awkward silence. Did he seriously forget my character's backstory? Or does he seriously expect me to RP me interacting with my own patron? I ask him what he means, and he and other members of the party get more and more annoyed that I don't embark on a massive mini questline doing mundane chores in my room at the inn or opening a business. Apparently, and I kid you not, the Tabaxi took up a ton of time in the session before the one I joined, opening and operating a fishery business. and is expected to check back in when we head back to that town to see how it's running. Look, are you going to do something or what? I finally come up with something after a minute. I'd like to go to the bounty office. I figured I'd check and see if my family had a bounty on my head due to some backstory stuff. Or at least kill some minor enemy and get some money to spend since I lost all mine in the first 15 minutes of last session. The fighter chimed in. I'd like to go with him. Sure, might as well get this downtime session done quickly so we can actually go on an adventure together and interact. Okay, fighter. Your backstory secret is that a group of bandits killed your family, right? Out of character, I'll let you know. I'm probably going to have the next group of bandits we fight be those bandits, so I can get it out of the way. The fighter goes quiet. They hadn't gone into any detail at all about their character. That's right. The DM is just so lazy that he was openly spoiling player backstories to get them out of the way. Anything to avoid having to work on DMing the story, right? And that was strike 3. Something goes down at the bounty office, but I'm not paying attention anymore. Just seething at the DM's blatant disrespect to role-playing and having wasted my time with this game. Someone else's turn comes up and he wants to buy a particular item from a shop in town. Sure. Look, I don't really understand the part of the book about this shop. Could you guys just sort this out for me? And just starts uploading shaky phone camera shots of pages from the Icewind Dale book. At this point I just left the Discord, deleted the invite, and a moment later the DM blocked me. It was honestly just a disaster from start to end. It honestly felt like the DM wanted to God mode run Icewind Dale with his self-insert, but couldn't find someone to DM for him, so he effectively wanted us to play as NPCs for him to interact with, and occasionally psychologically torture outside of dungeons. And there we have it. The DM randomly dropping a Tarrasque has me stumped. It seems to be a purposeless sensationalist event. Is it supposed to inspire awe in the players? I'm not too sure. The DM seemingly taking any character interaction to heart and punishing the player for doing things that they don't like seems a little off to me, especially as it seemed to occur when interacting with the DMPC. It kind of gives off the vibe that the entire group is just along for the ride, as the DM delivers their story. This seems compounded with the various instances where the players have no real agency, and the plot just sort of moves along no matter what they do. There's an air of the infallible DM here too, where the DM believes they can do no wrong, and are somehow elevated above all the other players. Which is sort of missing the point of what D&D is about, in my mind anyway, where everyone is contributing to the fun of the game, and believing yourself greater than others is better just left out of it. Whilst the DM doesn't come off well in this story at all, I do wonder why our player even stayed beyond the first session. What do you think? Have you ever had a DM who is happy to just openly spoil player backstories to get them out of the way? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed the content, please take a second to like and subscribe. I greatly appreciate your continued support. That's all I have for this evening. Good night.